Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. I lunged for my dad's phone before he could slam it down. His thumb hovered over the delete button, knuckle white. I hated myself for grabbing it, but I did it anyway. He jerked back like I'd touched a hot wire. I'm Jenna, 32, and I thought I was helping him. That's the excuse I used in my head over and over. He glared at me, then at the screen. The notification sat there like a dare. Give it back. His hand stayed out steady and rigid. I kept the phone close to my chest, childish and stubborn. My mom's chair scraped behind me, fast and sharp. Nobody moved like this was a normal family moment. Dad's mouth opened, then closed like he swallowed words. He lifted his other hand and I saw it tremble. That shake scared me more than any yelling could. It told me this was bigger than pride. You don't get to decide for me. His voice went flat. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't let go. I heard my own breath stutter and it made me angry. Why did I need control so badly right then? He reached again, slower this time, like he was negotiating. I turned the screen away, then hated that move instantly. My mom raised a palm between us, quiet but firm. Dad's eyes flicked to her, asking for backup. Don't. My mom's word landed heavy. Dad's jaw tightened, then he looked at me again. I saw something raw there and I almost gave in. Then the phone buzzed and his face drained. The app banner slid down, bright and impossible to ignore. It said the results were ready right now, no takebacks. Dad flinched at the sound like it was a siren. I held my breath and watched him fight himself. You wanted this, I heard myself say it and cringed. His stare snapped up, sharp and hurt. He shook his head once, slow like a warning. That shake felt like a door closing. He stepped back, then paced 2 tight laps. His hands kept opening and closing, like he needed somewhere to put them. He stopped at the counter, shoulders stiff, eyes wet but controlled. He looked older in a way I can't unsee. You think this is a game? He tapped his chest once. My stomach dropped because he was right about that part. I tried to answer and only air came out. The silence stretched until it started to sting. Mom slid her phone across the table toward him. He didn't touch it, he just stared at it like a trap. Then he pointed at my hand, still clutching his screen. His fingers shook again and my confidence cracked. Open it. Mom's voice stayed low, almost careful. Dad turned his head toward her, eyes wide and accusing. He looked back at me and I saw panic winning. He whispered, if I see it, I can't unsee it. I should have handed it over right there, no debate. Instead, I unlocked the phone with my own thumb. Dad made a broken sound, half laugh and half gasp. The results page loaded and the first match started to appear. Dad snatched the phone from my hand and thumbed the screen hard. I expected him to close the app, but he hit the match list. My mom caught my elbow, a silent warning to stay put. Dad scrolled once and stopped so fast it looked painful. The top results showed a name I did not recognize. The percentage sat beside it, high enough to punch you. Dad dragged the phone closer, then pulled it away again. His lips moved like he was counting without sound. Read it. My mom leaned in, knuckles pressed to the table. Dad tilted the screen toward her but kept his grip tight. I leaned too, then stopped when his shoulders tensed. He did not want me that close, and I deserved it. He tapped the profile, then stared at the preview text. A small icon flashed and a message option appeared. Dad's finger hovered, then jerked back like it burned. I felt my own face heat up with dread. You can ignore it. I hated how weak that sounded. Dad flicked his eyes at me, then looked down again. He swallowed once, sharp like he was forcing it down. Then he hit the button to message anyway. My mom slid her chair closer, knees angled toward him. Dad's thumb paused over the empty text box. He typed 2 words, then erased them, then typed again. I watched him delete like he was erasing his own nerve. He started with hi and stopped there, pathetic and honest. He added 1 line about the match, then backspaced half of it. His breathing went shallow, quick, almost annoyed. The draft sat unfinished, waiting to embarrass him. My mom reached out, then pulled her hand back at the last inch. That restraint hit me harder than a slap would. Dad glanced at her, then at the send arrow. His thumb trembled and the screen shook with it. Do it now. My mom's voice turned crisp, no comfort left. Dad nodded once and pressed send with a hard jab. The whoosh sound played, stupidly cheerful. Dad flinched like that noise had teeth. The app spun for a second, then showed delivered. Dad froze, eyes locked on that single word. I tried to speak, then shut my mouth before I made it worse. My mom squeezed my L. Bow so tight it hurt. Dad set the phone down, then immediately picked it back up. He refreshed the screen, then refreshed again, then again. Each swipe looked more frantic than the last. I could feel the room shrinking around us. "You're going to break it," the joke came out wrong. Dad's head snapped toward me, eyes glassy and sharp. My stomach flipped and I wished I could rewind 10 minutes. He turned away without answering, which felt worse. A reply popped up and Dad's hand shot out fast. He opened it so quickly the text blurred. My mom leaned in and held her breath like a child. Dad's face tightened, then went blank. The message was polite, short, and not suspicious. It asked for his name and where he tested. Dad stared at the questions like they were loaded. He looked at me as if I had invited a stranger inside. My mom pointed at the screen, 2 quick taps in the air. Dad typed his first name only, then paused again. He almost added our last name, then stopped himself. That hesitation told me he feared hope more than risk. He sent the reply, then pushed the phone across the table. It stopped in front of my mom like he could not hold it. He stood up, chair legs screeching, and walked off. His boots hit the hallway fast, then slowed near the bedroom. My mom stared at the phone like it might explode. She looked at me, brows lifted in a hard question. I opened my hands empty, trying to show I got it. She stood too, and we listened to Dad's door click shut. A minute later, he came back with his jaw clenched tight. He did not sit, he hovered like he might bolt. He reached for the phone again, then stopped short. He looked at my mom and muttered, "If they ask for proof." Another bubble appeared before he finished the sentence. Dad grabbed the phone and read, shoulders rising. The match wrote one line that made my mom cover her mouth. It said, "I think you are my brother," and Dad did not blink. Dad yanked the curtains shut with one violent pull. He kept the phone face down like it could leak noise. My mom held up a finger telling me to stop hovering. I hovered anyway because I'm stubborn when I'm scared. The match sent another message and Dad flipped the phone fast. His eyes skimmed, then stalled on one line. "Do you have any paperwork?" His throat jumped when he read it. He looked at me like I had set him up. My mom tapped the screen with 2 quick knuckles. "Ask what they have." Her tone was all business now. Dad typed, erased, then typed again with shaking hands. He hit send and stared like the air might answer first. A photo arrived and Dad angled the screen away from me. I caught a glimpse anyway because of course I did. It looked like a hospital ID bracelet with a baby's name line. Dad's lips pressed together hard and he went very still. "Could be fake," the words fell out before I could stop them. Dad snapped his head toward me, eyes sharp and tired. My mom shot me a glare, then softened her face on purpose. That switch told me she was managing him like glass. The match followed up with 2 dates and a location line. Dad read them twice, then once more like punishment. He set the phone down, then shoved it away from himself. He rubbed his palms on his jeans like he needed friction. My mom slid a notepad toward him without a word. He wrote the dates down, then circled the month hard. The pen tore the paper a little, which made him flinch. He stared at the tear like it meant something. He stood up so fast his chair knocked the table edge. He walked to the hallway, then turned back like he forgot how. "I have it somewhere." His voice sounded thin and forced. My mom nodded once and I followed before she could stop me. Dad opened the closet and shoved boxes aside with his forearm. He found a worn folder and hugged it to his chest. He carried it back like it weighed 100 pounds. He dropped it on the table and the sound made me jump. He flipped pages with care, then with impatience. A seal stamp showed up, then a signature block. Dad traced one line with his finger, slow and exact. He stopped on a date and his face tightened again. My mom leaned in close, eyes moving fast. She pointed at the date from the message, then at the paper. They were not the same day, but they were close. That near match felt worse than a clean miss. Dad grabbed the phone again and typed a short question. "Is your date from the hospital or the court?" He paused mid-word. He finished it anyway, then tossed the phone onto the table. It slid an inch and stopped like it was waiting too. The reply came back quick like they had been ready. Hospital, one word, then a photo of a typed record header. Dad stared at the header, then covered his mouth with his hand. He whispered, "That's the same county," and his eyes went wet. I tried to touch his shoulder and my hand froze halfway. You know that moment when help feels like harm. Dad didn't look at me, WH. It somehow felt like mercy. Then he turned the folder over and a different name fell out. Dad snatched the loose paper from the table and tore it in half. My mom grabbed his wrist before he could shred the rest. I reached for the scraps, then stopped when he jerked away. His eyes were wild, like the room had turned on him. "Why is there another name?" My mom held the torn pieces up. Dad stared at them like he hated them for existing. He tried to take them back, then hesitated mid-reach. That pause told me he was scared of what he might read. I slid the scraps together on the table, careful and slow. They formed a typed line and a handwritten note under it. Dad leaned in, then pulled back like he felt sick. My mom's fingers tapped the table once, impatient. "Text her," my mom pointed at the phone without looking at me. Dad's mouth tightened and he shook his head hard. He pressed a palm to his forehead, then dragged it down. The movement looked like he was wiping off his own face. He picked up the phone, unlocked it, then stopped again. The chat thread sat open, waiting like it knew us. Dad typed a question, deleted it, then typed another. He hit send before he could change his mind. I hate this part because I watched him spiral. I told myself I was staying calm, but I was not. I kept scanning his hands for that tremor returning. Every second without a reply felt like a verdict. The match answered with a request for a call. Dad read it, then pushed the phone toward my mom. My mom read it and nodded like this was a plan now. Dad's knee bounced fast and the table shook. "Tonight," my mom tapped the word on the screen. Dad's lips parted and he breathed out a harsh laugh. "You pick the time like it's a dentist," his voice cracked at the end. My mom's eyes narrowed and that shut him up. He wrote back short and stiff and set the phone down. Then he stood and paced the kitchen, then stopped, then paced again. He kept glancing toward the hallway like he wanted to run. I caught myself thinking, please don't leave the house. My mom pulled the folder closer and flipped to the last page. She traced a line with her nail, then pointed at a signature. Dad leaned over her shoulder, then stiffened like he'd been hit. The same last name sat there again, faint but readable. "Do you see it?" My mom's voice went thin. Dad nodded once, then swallowed hard and looked away. I leaned in and saw it too, and my stomach sank. That name was on the torn scrap and on the papers. Dad grabbed a pen and wrote the name on fresh paper. He underlined it once, then again, then stopped himself. My mom snapped a photo of it with her phone, quick and practical. Dad watched her do it and his face pinched tight. "You're saving evidence," he pointed at the screen like an accusation. My mom shrugged, almost cold, then softened when he flinched. "I'm saving you from forgetting." Her hand hovered near his arm. Dad pulled back anyway and the space between them widened. The phone buzzed again and all three of us froze. Dad lunged for it and read without blinking. The match sent a second name, different spelling, same initials. My mom's eyes flicked to the adoption papers, then back. Dad slammed his palm on the table once hard. "Which one is real?" His voice came out louder than he meant. My mom flinched, and I hated him for making her flinch. Then I hated myself for thinking that. My mom typed a reply with brisk fingers and slid the phone back. She asked for anything official, anything with a header or stamp. Dad watched the typing like he was watching surgery. He kept rubbing his thumb against his ring, raw and repetitive. A photo arrived that made my mom inhale sharp. It was a scan of a birth record request, partly filled in. Dad leaned closer, eyes darting across the lines. He stopped on a mother's first name and went very quiet. I expected tears, but he just went blank again. He lowered the phone to the table and stared past it. My mom reached for his hand, then let her own fall back. The air felt thin, like we had used it up. "Call me when you're ready," the match sent that next. Dad stared at those words, then turned the phone face down. He looked at my mom and his voice dropped to a whisper. "If I hear her voice, what if it's the wrong person?" Dad grabbed the phone and jabbed the call button too hard. He put it on speaker, then snatched it back off speaker. My mom lifted her hands like, "Okay, your choice." The ringing went on long enough to feel like a punishment. A woman answered and Dad's throat locked instantly. Hello, her voice sounded careful like she expected trouble. Dad stared at the countertop and pressed his knuckles into it. My mom mouthed breathe and he still did. I'm the match, Dad's words came out thin and rushed. The line went quiet and I heard her inhale through her nose. I've waited for this call, that sentence hit him like a shove. Dad's eyes darted to me like I was to blame again. My mom leaned closer and pointed at the phone, steady. Ask her name, her whisper was clipped and practical. Dad nodded once, then asked it like it hurt his tongue. The woman said it and my stomach tightened at the calm certainty. Dad asked a second question, then a third, then stopped. He kept rubbing his thumb along the phone edge, raw and fast. The woman answered without hesitation, like she had notes ready. Then she said, I have documents, and Dad went rigid. My mom held out her palm, asking for the phone. Dad shook his head hard and turned away like a cornered kid. I need to hear it, his voice cracked and he hated himself. The woman stayed quiet like she heard the crack too. Can you prove it? Dad finally forced the words out. The woman exhaled slow like she had practiced patience. I can show you the record request, she paused, in a letter. Dad's shoulders rose and he did not lower them. My mom leaned in and spoke into the phone once. Meet in public, her tone left no room for debate. The woman agreed fast like she had feared we would refuse. Dad stared at the floor like it might open under him. They picked a diner off the highway halfway for both. Dad wrote the time down, then crossed it out, then wrote it again. My mom watched him and said nothing, which was smarter. I sat there feeling guilty because I started this push. The next morning, Dad drove like he was chasing something. My mom sat rigid in the passenger seat, hands folded tight. I sat in the back and kept checking the map like an idiot. Dad's jaw worked non-stop like he was grinding fear into dust. We pulled in and Dad stopped the car too far back. He killed the engine, then started it again, then killed it. My mom touched his shoulder once, quick, then withdrew. Dad stared at the entrance like it was a courtroom door. Inside, Dad moved slow and held his arms close. My mom scanned faces like she was searching for a threat. I tried to look casual and I failed at it completely. Then a woman near the window stood up, hands raised. She looked at Dad like she was seeing a ghost. Dad froze a few steps away, feet planted like nails. The woman pressed her fingers to her mouth, then lowered them. Her eyes went straight to his and neither blinked. Dad lifted a hand halfway, then dropped it. The woman took one step forward, then stopped herself too. My mom slid into the booth first, creating a barrier. Dad followed stiff, like he was borrowing his own body. The woman sat across from him and placed a folder on the table. Dad stared at it like it might jump at him. My mom nodded once, permission granted, and the woman opened it. Dad's hand twitched toward it, then pulled back again. She slid one page forward, then another, slow and deliberate. Dad leaned in enough to read, then flinched at the header. My mom's eyes tracked the lines like she was sorting facts. I watched Dad's face change, and it was brutal. You were born at the same hospital, the woman tapped a date. Dad's lips parted, then pressed together hard. My mom pointed at a line and asked one sharp question. The woman nodded, and Dad's breathing turned shallow again. Dad whispered, "That's me," like saying it might break it. The woman's eyes filled, and she wiped them fast with her sleeve. I knew it, her voice shook, and she did not hide that. Dad stared at her hands like her shaking scared him more. My mom asked about the letter, and the woman hesitated. She reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope. Dad's hand shot out, then stopped inches from it. He stared at the envelope like it was a live wire. You don't have to read it here, the woman kept her palms open. Dad swallowed hard and shook his head, stubborn and desperate. No, he took the envelope with 2 fingers, now. My mom's eyes flicked to me like, brace yourself. Dad opened it and unfolded one page, careful and angry. He read the first line and stopped like he got punched. His eyes moved again faster, then locked on a name. His knuckles went white around the paper and I heard it crinkle. He looked up at the woman and his voice went low. Who wrote this? His stare was sharp, almost accusing. The woman flinched, then held his gaze anyway. Our mother, she said, and Dad's face drained again. Dad tried to speak and nothing came out. He read more, lips moving, then he shook his head hard. My mom leaned in to read over his shoulder, then recoiled. Whatever she saw made her swallow like she was choking. Dad slammed the letter down, then grabbed it back instantly. I don't understand. His voice sounded small and he hated that. The woman's fingers tightened around the folder edge. Then she said she was a teenager and Dad went still. Dad's eyes flicked to my mom like he needed permission to feel. My mom nodded once and her eyes turned wet but steady. The woman kept going slow. She was defusing a bomb. She hid the pregnancy, she said, and Dad's jaw clenched hard. Dad shook his head fast and disbelieving. That doesn't explain giving me away. His hand trembled over the paper. The woman exhaled and glanced toward the window, avoiding him. She was scared of him, she said, and the booth went silent. Dad's head snapped up at that word, him. My mom's shoulders tightened like she already guessed this part. I felt my stomach flip because it sounded ugly. Dad whispered, "My father," and the woman nodded once. Dad stared at her like she had insulted him. He laughed once harsh, then stopped like it hurt. I spent my life wanting him. His voice cracked and he looked away. The woman's eyes went down like she carried shame too. She slid another page forward and Dad didn't touch it. "This is a police report number," her finger hovered above it. My mom's lips parted, then closed, controlled and furious. Dad stared at the number like it was a curse code. Dad pushed the letter toward me without looking at me. I didn't read it because I couldn't handle his trust. My mom pulled it back to him with one firm motion. "This stays with you," her look said, and Dad flinched anyway. Dad whispered, "So I was protection." The words sounded bitter in his mouth, like he hated needing it. The woman shook her head fast, eyes shining. "No," her hand pressed to her chest, "you were survival." Dad's hand curled into a fist, then opened again. He stared at the table and breathed through his nose, slow. Then he looked up and asked the question that cut the room. "Why keep her and not me?" His eyes didn't blink. The woman's face twisted, like she had dreaded that exact hit. She held up both hands, palms out like surrender. "I was born later," her voice dropped, "after he was gone." Dad's mouth opened, then closed, and his throat bobbed hard. My mom reached across the table and touched Dad's wrist. Dad didn't pull away this time, which felt like a miracle. He stared at their hands like he couldn't process safety. Then he asked, "Is she alive?" and my chest tightened. The woman shook her head once, slow and apologetic. Dad's eyes shut and his face pinched like he was fighting pain. He nodded like he already knew, which wrecked me. Then he whispered, "So this is it," and his voice went hollow. The woman slid a phone across the table, screen already open. Dad stiffened like he expected another trap. "It's her grave listing," the woman's voice trembled, "and her photo." Dad stared at the screen and his breath caught mid-pull. He didn't touch it at first, like touching meant consent. Then he reached out and tapped once, gentle and careful. His eyes moved over the photo, then stopped dead. He whispered, "She has my nose," and his face broke. Dad made a sound I had never heard from him. It wasn't a sob, it was something strangled and old. My mom's other hand covered his fist, steady and warm. The woman watched him fall apart and she didn't look away. Dad wiped his face with his sleeve, angry at the wet. He took a breath, then another, then pointed at the woman. "What do you want from me?" His tone was sharp, defensive. The woman flinched, then straightened, refusing to be small. "I want to know you." Her voice was quiet, not begging. Dad's eyes flicked down, then up, like he was recalculating. My mom nudged the folder toward him again, slow and deliberate. Dad stared at it, then at her, and his jaw worked. He shook his head once, then stopped, then nodded instead. "Not today," his voice came out rough but honest. The woman nodded back, accepting the boundary without a fight. Then she slid a sticky note forward with a number and waited. Dad picked up the note and folded it into his palm. He stood up too fast, then steadied himself on the booth edge. My mom rose with him like a shield that could also hug. I stayed seated because my legs forgot how to cooperate. Dad turned back to the woman, eyes red and locked. He swallowed and forced one last question through. "Did she ever look for me?" His voice shook on the last word. The woman's throat worked and she nodded like it hurt. "She called agencies for years." Her hands trembled on the folder. "She kept your baby picture in her wallet." Her eyes flicked to mine. Dad stared like he had been punched again, softer this time. Then he whispered, "So I wasn't thrown away," and his face crumpled. We walked out and Dad stopped at the doorway. He looked back at the woman and she gave a small wave. Dad lifted his hand and returned it, awkward and real. Then he turned away fast, like staying might break him again. In the parking lot, Dad leaned on the car and breathed hard. My mom stayed close, saying nothing, doing everything. I stood there feeling like the villain and the witness. Dad opened his fist and that folded number sat in his palm.